Well, up there on screen is 3 different generations of the Thomas, well, let's call it take and play type trains. The very early version of those was called Take Along, and they were a little bit different to what you see around today. And there has just been released a new take on the take and play. In this video, I'll be examining the differences between the new take and play versus the generation before it.
Here's that warning. If you have any problem in learning about how toys are made, maybe this video is not suitable for you.
Well, here's a early Thomas take along, and why I know it's an early one is because the front boiler here and the funnel is all metal. That changed a little bit later on to being plastic. The one way you can identify these styles of trains very clearly is they've got a large number 1. The artwork here tends to be smaller than the actual size of the top of the cab. And what else can I say? Maybe yellow whistles. I think they turn gold a little bit later on. The face is very different. I think that's probably the thing that most people would look at the face and say it's got a really, well, it's got a moon face. Probably the best way to describe it, with reverse derpy eyes on this one, if there is such a thing. But I mean, to many children, this is a classic, and it came in and it was replacing what was a very, very nice looking version of Thomas in the Ertl style. And I think a lot of people did struggle with the way that this model is deformed. I certainly did, but I'll tell you what, because I've got children and I've seen the way this toy plays out, I soon realised it's an absolute classic toy, and it certainly, well, had some advantages over the Ertl in different ways. I don't want to get caught up ripping apart this one and examining the old take-along Thomas. You'd be fairly hard to find them these days. What I'd like to do is look at something a little bit more relevant, and that's the new version of the take and play versus the one that preceded it. We're just looking at the packaging first. We'll look at the classic, or earlier version we'll call it. And what was nice about this packaging is that no matter how you pegged it in the store, if you pegged it that way, you could still see what's in the carton. If you pegged it reverse, you could still see what's in the carton. So in a sense, that was very clever. And I bought a lot of these over the last couple of years, and what I found was it was very consistent what you found as the product. Yeah, but you know, there were some things I didn't like about this versus the earlier take-alongs. The fact that there was you didn't get a card anymore. You know, there's a few things. It's funny how things just nibble away and disappear. And if we look at the newer version of the packaging and just sort of analysing the packaging here, it's a cleaner feel when you look at that. There's less, what would you call it, visual, riff-raff going on. On the back, well, we get to see what else is in the series, which is sort of nice. The other packaging didn't tell us that. Interesting, it's sort of telling us it's magnetic, which is very important. That's sort of the key to these toys, is the fact that they're all magnetized. They all, in a sense, connect via magnets. And the important info on this box is actually hidden underneath. But that's the new packaging, and I think what we're going to find is little Thomas in there is going to be a little bit different as well. For the purpose of this video, this Thomas here I will call the 2009 Thomas, made in China, and the newer version is the 2012 Thomas, made in Thailand. Well, first up, let's have a weigh-in, and it's going to be the 2009 model first. Okay, the scales are set to grams. Let's bring in the 2009 model first. I've got 61 grams there. Let's bring in the 2012 Thomas next. I've got 53 grams there. It's a lighter Thomas. And what I've found over the years is this range of toys has been getting lighter and lighter and lighter. Usually it means there's more plastic incorporated in the design, but a lighter toy is actually a safer toy, because if you've got children who throw toys, then there's less damage once they go through your big LCD TV. Okay, let's look at the very important information which lies underneath both of these Thomases. Well, here's the 2009 Thomas. It says Galen Thomas Limited. It also says Mattel there. It says China. What's interesting is it's got screws holding it together. Okay, let's look at the newer one. Okay, now for that 2012 Thomas. It says, obviously, 2012 Mattel, made in Thailand. Very digital Thomas there for E49, and very interestingly, it has rivets holding it together. Possibly the most notable difference in the new model is it's got some hollow axles. The next big obvious difference is the face. The 2012 model has a face which is very reminiscent of what you would see getting around on some of the Trackmaster trains. It's certainly conforming very much closely to what you would see in the CGI series. And the differences between these two faces is huge. And I'd really like you to tell me which one do you prefer. Do you prefer the older style face, which is on the 2009 model, or this new, well, CGI'd face? And you know what? In looking at the faces here, I think one of the big differences is the smile. The older version, 2009 model, had a much bigger smile, more cheerier cheeks. The newer version, it's a much more subtle smile, and that's going to play out to be, well, to make the face very different. Another key has changed. The dome on 2009 is metal, the dome on the 2012 is plastic. On the back of Tomas there's some differences. The cold bunker is matte black on the 2009 model. On the 2012 it's gloss black, but there's also, looks like some extra, well, design there to keep them all together. I bet you that is making sure that the running plate stays on Tomas. Well, it's all sort of spooky. The more you look at these two, the more differences you see. I think the next logical step is to pull both of these apart to see what's going on inside and try and work out why there's been some major changes done to our favourite little character. Well, I'll pull apart the 2009 model first, and because it's only got screws it's easy to pull apart. And what's really nice about these models was that you could just undo that front screw and your, well, front of the boiler and face would pop off. And I know some people would come in and do custom faces or swap a face from another, you know, nice Tomas or, you know, characterised Tomas, and you could go and, you know, plonk it back on really simply. And it was a real simple swap and change, but with that newer version of Tomas, you won't be able to do that because it's got a rivet there. Anyway, I'll pull this apart and stop yabbering, and we'll look at these all pulled apart. And here's the undercarriage of the 2009 model, and I've just taken the top off and the face and all. And what's interesting here is that, let's say if you did take the screws apart and you're going to try and easily pull it apart, you know, even further, it's actually quite difficult. It's all locked together, and it's part of the safety requirements toys need, because they can't have the small bits and bobs coming off and presenting dangers. And these toys are, you know, super safe in that fact. And it's something, when I looked at the knockoff dark side toys, the problem with those was they presented little tiny pieces that became choking hazards. Well, I have to admit, this 2009 model, just to get this running plate off, or running board off, it's quite tricky. I've done a lot of drilling up here on these other two areas, and I don't want to break it to pull it apart. I'm trying to get it, you know, in its component pieces. You know, I've pulled apart one of the very early versions when this is a take-along. So again, right back to the early version. It's the plastic fretted take-alongs. They came along a little bit later on. And when I put the Gandy Dancer inside, and I had to pull him all apart, and I don't remember having to fight to get the running board off. But I'll tell you what, this thing is really putting up a fight, which is a very good sign, because it's showing me that there's no way little boy Wonder is going to be able to pull this apart at home. I've spent a good 10 minutes trying to do this, and it might beat me in the end. I'll keep going. Well, quite a tricky little design. That's the front, because the face section slots into that. This is the back, and I drilled out those two, and I think I wasted my time drilling that. There's actually a hidden, almost blind plastic connection point which goes through that rear magnet, and it's all sort of holding it together, and completely blind. You wouldn't know it's there until you see this. There's the rest of the way it adhered. Very interesting. Very, very sneaky. Okay, it's your turn, Mr. 2012 Tomas. And as I said before, I'm going to have to drill him out at the bottom. And we're probably going to find it's a totally different way his running plate has been adhered to the model. Let's just hope it's not like the nightmare they've just gone through. I dare say that tag at the back is a clue to the way it's all held together. I dare say if you see a vice and then you see a Tomas put inside it, it's not going to be one of those usual days. You know, I know there's going to be some people who are disturbed by seeing this, and they say, Leo, you shouldn't be showing children how to pull apart toys. But the way I want to look at this is a curious mind, or an inquisitive mind, is a very healthy mind. And one thing to note here is, first up, these rivets it's plastic, which is very interesting indeed. So it's very soft, and I'm going to have to take my time doing this very carefully. And by pulling stuff apart, you learn a lot about how things are made, and it's actually a very, very good thing to have under your belt. And it's real steady as she goes here, because there'll be a point when it'll all just release, but I don't want to be over drilling stuff, and it's a matter of just feeling how well together it still is. It still feels fairly well together. Might just go up a drill size to try and pull these bottom plastic rivets. Steady as she goes, Captain. I've just gone up a drill size. It's got to be pretty close. It's hard to know how deep. Oh, there we are. There's the face gone. Okay, cool. Well, the face is free. I'll pull this from the vise, see what else comes apart. Whoa, okay. Whoa, that's very different. That is so different to the previous model and the way it's been put together. Whoa, I'll cover the beauty here. Well, just to give you a reference point, that's where the face part comes out, and I've of course drilled the bottom there out. It's all plastic, very easy to drill, but what I've come up against here is, this is basically saying, I do not want to come apart, and I'm going to be really tricky to pull apart. These are interference, well, fits. They've been pushed up, and as you can see, they've latched onto those little lugs of plastic. That's telling me, you know, kids, don't get to the wheels, don't get to the magnets. That's a really clever design. Mind you, that other 2009 model was very hard to pull apart. I struggled for far too long, and I'm going to struggle to pull this apart as well. But I'm very curious to see the axles and the way the wheels have been put on versus the other model. Whew, that is clever. If I bring in a pair of long nose pliers, you can see the way those little tongues have latched on in there. The problem here is I've got a whole double row of them, so I've basically got to, you know, make all these, well, delatch to pull this apart. You know, mind you, I could just put them on a linisher and go VWAP and problem solved, but I don't want to destroy this piece. Well, I'm thinking the only thing I've got to be able to interact with all those little notches is a vise, basically mounted in the vise, and very much feel this as you go. It's very much a case of feeling the plastic bite, the plastic give a bit. Oh, I can feel it giving, and keeping it down and pushing it up. Oh, I can feel it lifting a bit more. It's not easy at all. This is designed not to come apart, and that's what it's all about, I dare say. Very obvious someone's done their homework here, and I haven't. Oh. Well, don't worry, mums and dads, I can absolutely assure you this is near impossible. Oh man, whoever thought of this deserves, I don't know, a Dyson award or something. It's like Fort Knox, the Fort Knox of toys, this bit. Well, I finally got it up. The first two popped, and I just wrenched that to nothing, and I think what's happened is that I ended up basically cracking over the tabs on the other side. But what a nightmare. That was possibly more difficult to pull apart than that other blind tricky bit which was on the 2009 Tomas. Whew, that is not made to come apart. Well, here are both of the Tomases pulled apart side by side. This one here is the 2009 model, and the other side is of course the 2012. There is a massive difference between the way these two have been built together and the components that they use, and I'm really surprised because on the outside it isn't that obvious. My gut feeling is this 2012 model is different in the fact that it would be a faster build in the factory. It's more of a snap together type build. Both of them are very, very hard to pull apart, to pull off that running board, running plate part of Tomas. But with the 2009 one, which has got the screws, it'll be a little bit more manual intensive in putting together. I think what's most surprising here is there's the 2009, there's the 2012. I don't think there's even a component that could swap from one to the other. Even the magnets are a slightly different design. And I think the other part is the axles. Let's take a look at the axles on each train. Okay, here's the undercarriage or running gear or whatever you want to call it of each train. There's a 2009 one, there's the 2012, and they are both very, very different designs. And I mean, from the outside, all you really knew from the 2012 was that they had those little holes. But the axle size, the actual piece of metal, There's the 2009. It's actually quite a large piece of metal. That is the axle. The 2012, it's a little thin spindly thing. And the other thing here is that the 2012, the axle just pops out. It actually reminds me of the way the Ertl axles were when you pulled an Ertl apart. It's very, very Ertl-ish. Is that a name? Ertl-ish? Let me pull a wheel out of here and we'll see the way that the actual plastic is adhered to the metal, which is very important indeed. Well, excuse my big fat fingers here. These bits of train are tiny. That's the 2009 axle and wheel set. That's the 2012. And what's very interesting is these are floating on the axle there. It's a very flimsy little axle. Yeah, I won't say anything else on that. We'll just leave it at that, I think. It's a very different design to what was before, which I thought was an excellent idea. And that's where I just put the 2012 down. This is the one where you're basically locked up. The wheels are locked onto the axle. And if I pull one off, you'll see the reason why they're locked on. I wonder why they've changed that little flimsy axle. The way I pull these wheels off the axle is I snip them, and they tend to split. Or it's going to make a liar out of me, one or the other. Or I'm going to snip my fingers and scream. And you'll see, hopefully you'll see the beauty of how this system works. These things are obviously meant to try us in life. And obviously you're not meant to be pulling these things apart. That's what it's all about. If I get rid of that wheel there, you can see how it's all notched. And that's going to help adhere to the plastic. I would assume that it's done as the plastic is soft. And as the plastic cools, it goes hard. And once it's connected to that rough bit of work on the metal there, it never comes off. I haven't got a technical name for that. Maybe someone out there does. Well, I'm just looking at the 2012 design with that it's like a Hot Wheels axle in a way. And I suppose it's got less friction with a design like this. I don't know how, safety-wise, like if you're worried about bits and pieces coming off your little train, I don't know, to me the other design seemed far more appropriate. You know, sure, there's totally different designs here in I'll call it the cabin, the coal bunker. But the part which is really different is the metal piece. That's the 2009 metal aspect of the model. And, of course, the face slides in there. And there's a big spike there, and that's part of the thing that the screw goes up, that the back screw goes up and holds Tomas all together. And I suppose tooling gets tight. I mean, I don't know why they changed these things. Why would Tomas need a total redesign? And here's the 2012, and the face slots there, and there's the bit where the plastic dome pops up. But inside you haven't got that big metal spike, because it's a totally different way all the components are latched together. And you know, well, maybe someone out there can answer why there was a big change. Maybe they had to change it. Maybe they just like changing it because, well, tooling gets tired. Who knows? And possibly the other part which is really important to look at, get focus going there. This is the 2009 model, and the way the face was held on was that little screw in behind here, and there was like a piece of metal that did the latching onto the die-cast part of the model, and you could pull it out. And a lot of people were swapping faces around and making a custom face, and hey, that was all part of the fun, wasn't it? Well, I certainly did it. I'm sure you did it as well. On the 2012 model, it's a totally different kettle of fish, and I still haven't worked out how to pop the face out. I'm not going to put a drill in there because all it's going to do is going to drill through and pop out and give him some new nostrils. But it'll be some sort of interference fit, which it looks like it's going to be very delicate work to pop his face off. Maybe someone out there has already done this, and they can tell me how to do it. Well, there you go. Those two models looked fairly similar on the outside, but there's a whole lot of shaking going on inside. Which one did you prefer? Did you prefer the old 2009? I'm shaking his head there. Or did you prefer the 2012? I'm shaking the head there. You know, I think I can see why they've changed. But I can see that personally, I feel the old 2009 was a far nicer model to make customised. Anyway, thank you for watching this video, and bye for now. Thomas love. Okay, I've got the scale set to grams and the 2009, take two. It has a glossy one, but also the addition of, it looks like, something extra to keep him all together. fail. I've just magnetised myself there. Well, excuse my fingers and all this. These little tiny parts, and my fingers are big and fat. Oh, fail.